Disclaimer: this story is fictional and created solely for entertainment. The people, companies, legal disputes, and events depicted here are invented. Any resemblance to actual persons, businesses, or real-life situations is purely coincidental. Story: millionaire husband canceled his pregnant wife's flight to her mom's funeral to teach her a lesson, then froze when she canceled him at 4:47 a.m. 7 months pregnant and trying to reach her mother's funeral. Claire learned that the airline had not canceled her seat. Her millionaire husband had. Grant called it a lesson. Claire's answer was quieter than revenge. The canceled ticket would be only the first decision she took back. Your flight wasn't canceled by the airline, Mrs. Whitmore. It was canceled online using your reservation details. The words landed harder than a scream. Claire Bennett stood beneath the cold fluorescent lights of Terminal B, 7 months pregnant, one hand wrapped around the handle of her suitcase, the other resting instinctively over the daughter moving inside her. 4:47 a.m. Above the check-in counter, departure screens flickered blue and white. Wheels rattled across polished tile. A boarding announcement dissolved into the low mechanical hum of an airport waking before sunrise. But Claire heard almost none of it. "My mother's funeral is this morning," she whispered. "There has to be a mistake." The agent looked at the screen again. "I'm sorry. The reservation was canceled at 3:52 a.m. Claire's phone was already in her hand. Grant answered on the fourth ring. No panic, no confusion, just the sleepy, controlled voice of a man who already knew why she was calling. "Claire, you canceled my flight?" Silence. That silence told her everything. 2 days earlier, Margaret Bennett had died unexpectedly at 61. Claire's mother, her closest friend, the woman who had held her through childhood fevers, heartbreak, and every lonely year of a marriage Claire was only beginning to understand. The funeral started in 6 hours. "Grant, I told you not to leave." Claire's fingers tightened around the phone. Her husband, Grant Whitmore, was 38, handsome, disciplined, and wealthy enough that people rarely told him no. His real estate empire had put his name on glass towers across 3 states. And somewhere along the way, Grant had begun treating his marriage the same way he treated those buildings. As something he owned. "I'm going to bury my mother. And you walked out on my investor dinner last night." Claire closed her eyes. The baby kicked. "Grant, listen to yourself." "No. You listen." His voice became softer. "That was always worse. You walked out while I was talking to you last night. You packed your suitcase after I explicitly told you we needed to attend that dinner together." Claire stared through the terminal windows at the darkness outside. Then Grant said it. "Maybe now you'll learn a lesson." Her breath stopped. "What?" "Come home. Apologize. I'll book another flight." For several seconds, Claire said nothing. Around her, strangers hugged goodbye. A little boy pressed his face against the glass to watch an airplane taxi toward the runway. Somewhere nearby, coffee beans ground beneath the sharp hiss of steam. Life kept moving. Her mother was dead, and her husband had turned the final goodbye into a punishment. "You canceled my flight to my mother's funeral because I disobeyed you? Don't make it dramatic." Claire almost laughed. Instead, something inside her became frighteningly still. Grant mistook the silence for surrender. "I'll have Daniel pick you up. Come home, get some rest, and when you're ready to behave rationally, we'll discuss." Claire ended the call. Grant Whitmore stared at his phone from their penthouse bedroom. Claire had never hung up on him before. Back at the airport, she lowered herself carefully onto a metal bench. Her hands were trembling now, not from weakness, from recognition. For 6 years, Grant had chosen the restaurants, the vacations, the cars, the doctors, even which friends were good influences. Every decision had seemed too small to fight over. Until this one. Claire opened the airline app. The next flight had 1 seat remaining. The price made her stomach tighten. Most household cards were accounts Grant managed, with Claire listed only as an authorized user. But he didn't control everything. Claire reached deep into her wallet and pulled out an old blue debit card bearing only one name. Claire Bennett. A card Grant believed she had closed years ago. She entered the number. The screen spun. Once. Twice. Then turned green. Confirmed. Claire stared at that word as tears finally filled her pale blue eyes. Her mother had once told her that the most dangerous moment in a controlling marriage wasn't when a woman started fighting. It was when she stopped asking permission. Claire stood as boarding began. She placed one hand over her belly and walked toward the gate. Behind her, Grant was already calling again. She didn't answer, because Grant Whitmore believed he had just taught his pregnant wife a lesson. He had no idea she had learned a completely different one. 48 hours earlier, Claire Bennett had been standing barefoot in the nursery when her phone rang. She almost ignored it. Grant hated interruptions during dinner preparations, and that evening mattered to him more than most. 6 investors were flying in from London and Toronto to discuss Whitmore Development's largest acquisition of the year. The chef was arriving at 5. Flowers at 6. Claire was expected downstairs by 7:30, smiling beside her husband in the ivory maternity dress he had selected for her. Then Claire saw the caller ID. St. Matthew's Medical Center. Something inside her went cold. "Hello, Mrs. Whitmore?" The voice on the other end was gentle. Too gentle. By the time the doctor said, "I'm very sorry," Claire was already gripping the edge of the crib. Her mother was gone. Margaret Bennett had suffered a massive cerebral hemorrhage while making coffee in the small Wisconsin kitchen where Claire had grown up. A neighbor found her. The ambulance came quickly. Nothing had been enough. Claire sank onto the nursery rug. "No," she whispered. One word. Then again. "No." Grant found her there 20 minutes later. He stood in the doorway in a charcoal suit, checking his watch. "Claire, the florist needs you downstairs." She looked up. "My mom died." For a moment, Grant's expression changed. He crossed the room, crouched beside her, and placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry." Claire wanted to collapse into him. Instead, his phone vibrated. Grant looked at the screen, and something vanished from his face. "When is the funeral?" "Saturday morning." Grant stood. "That's difficult." Claire stared at him. "What?" "The investors arrive Friday. Dinner is Friday night. My mother is dead." "I understand that." "No, Grant. I don't think you do." His jaw tightened. Claire had seen that expression hundreds of times. It appeared whenever a contractor challenged him, whenever an employee missed a deadline, whenever Claire stopped being convenient. "You're 7 months pregnant," he said. "Flying while emotional isn't sensible. My doctor cleared me last week." "That isn't the point." Claire slowly rose, one hand supporting her belly. "I'm flying home before dawn Saturday." "This is your home." The sentence hung between them. Claire walked past him. She packed quietly. Black dress, maternity clothes, her mother's old silver bracelet. Grant followed her into the bedroom. "Claire, don't turn this into a confrontation." She stopped folding. "I'm burying my mother, and I'm asking my wife to support me during the most important business dinner of my year." There it was. Not grief, not concern, a scheduling conflict. "I won't be here." Grant's face hardened. "Everything you have exists because I pay for it." Claire looked at him. 6 years earlier, she might have cried. 3 years earlier, she would have apologized. The suitcase stayed packed until Friday evening. Claire refused the investor dinner and checked into an airport hotel. At 3:52 Saturday morning, while she slept, Grant opened the shared travel account. Her itinerary appeared on his laptop. New York to Madison. Seat 14A. Departure, 6:05 a.m. His cursor hovered over one button. Cancel reservation. Grant clicked, then confirmed it. He leaned back, satisfied. By sunrise, Claire would understand that walking away from him had consequences. But inside her suitcase, beneath the black dress she would wear to Margaret's funeral, was something Grant knew nothing about. A cream envelope. Margaret had mailed it 3 weeks before she died. On the front, in her familiar handwriting, were 6 words. "For Claire, when you finally need it." Claire had never opened it, and Grant Whitmore had just given her a reason to. By the time Grant Whitmore realized Claire had boarded another flight, she was already 30,000 feet above the ground. His first call came before takeoff. His second came while the plane was taxiing. By the time Claire switched her phone to airplane mode, there were 11 missed calls. She stared at Grant's name until the screen went dark. For years, seeing it had produced the same reflex inside her. Answer. Explain. Apologize. This time, Claire slipped the phone into her purse. "Everything okay?" The elderly woman beside her spoke softly. Claire turned toward the window. Morning sunlight was beginning to bleed across the horizon, turning the clouds gold. "My mother died." The woman's expression softened. "I'm sorry." Claire nodded. Then, almost without thinking, she added, "My husband tried to stop me from going to her funeral." The sentence sounded different when spoken aloud. Ugly. Real. The woman didn't offer advice. She simply reached across the armrest and squeezed Claire's hand. Sometimes kindness from a stranger exposes cruelty you have spent years learning to call normal. A little over 2 hours later, Claire landed in Wisconsin. Her phone exploded the moment she turned it on. 23 missed calls. 9 messages. The first sounded concerned. "Call me." The second sounded irritated. "This is childish, Claire." By the 5th, Grant had stopped pretending. "If you continue embarrassing me, there will be consequences." Claire read that one twice. Then another notification appeared. "Declined." She frowned. A second followed. "Your card has been temporarily suspended." Grant. Claire opened their banking app. Access denied. She tried the household card on which Grant was the primary account holder. Suspended. The family travel card was unavailable too. For a moment, the airport seemed to tilt beneath her. 7 months pregnant. Hundreds of miles from home. Her mother's funeral hours away. Grant had cut off the household credit he controlled. Her phone rang again. This time she answered. "Are you finished?" Grant asked. Claire said nothing. "I warned you not to leave." "You froze the household cards?" "I'm protecting our finances until you start behaving rationally." "Our finances?" "Claire, don't do this." She could hear voices behind him. His office. Grant had gone to work. Of course he had. "I need transportation to the funeral." "Then come home." A long silence. "You want me to miss my mother's funeral?" "I want my wife to understand that marriage has consequences." Claire felt her daughter move beneath her coat. Something inside her hardened. Not rage. Clarity. "Goodbye, Grant." She hung up. Then she did something he never expected. She took screenshots. Every declined transaction. Every threatening message. Every notification showing the exact time her access disappeared. Claire opened a secure email account Grant didn't know existed. She attached everything. Her thumb hovered over a contact. Rebecca Hale, attorney at law. Claire typed 4 words. "Add these to the file." Send. The message disappeared. No tears. No shaking. Just evidence. Outside baggage claim. Claire opened a rideshare app and entered her mother's address. Her old debit card worked perfectly. Grant had frozen the life he controlled. He had forgotten about the one Claire had quietly kept alive. Her phone buzzed again. Not Grant. Daniel Mercer, their longtime driver. "Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Whitmore instructed me not to provide transportation to you until further notice." "I'm sorry." Claire stared at the message. Even Daniel. Grant wasn't angry anymore. He was building walls around her. One card. One car. One decision at a time. And suddenly Claire remembered something Margaret had told her 6 months earlier. Control rarely arrives looking like a cage, sweetheart. Usually, someone hands you 1 bar at a time. Claire had laughed then. She wasn't laughing now. Her ride pulled to the curb. Before getting inside, she opened Grant's messages one final time. A new one appeared. "You have until tonight to fix this." Claire took another screenshot. Then sent it to Rebecca. "Add this one too." 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Rebecca was typing. Her reply contained only 7 words. "Claire, we have enough. Do not delete anything." Claire stopped breathing. Enough for what? She looked down at the cream envelope visible inside her half-open suitcase. For Claire, when you finally need it. Her mother had left her something. Her lawyer had been collecting something. And Grant Whitmore, convinced he was tightening his grip, had no idea that every punishment he delivered was becoming another piece of the case against him. The first handful of earth struck Margaret Bennett's coffin with a sound Claire knew she would remember forever. Soft, heavy, final. Rain drifted across the small Wisconsin cemetery, gathering on Claire's black coat and turning the blonde strands around her face dark with water. Beneath the coat, her 7-month belly curved forward like the only evidence that life could continue while hers seemed to be collapsing. There were no cameras, no chandeliers, no millionaire husband standing beside her. Only 32 folding chairs, wet grass, gray sky, and an empty space where Grant should have been. Claire placed one hand over her daughter. "Your grandmother would have loved you," she whispered. They had never officially chosen the baby's name. But standing beside her mother's grave, Claire suddenly knew. Margaret. Maggie. The baby kicked. Claire closed her eyes. Grant had not come. At 9:13 that morning, however, an enormous arrangement of white roses arrived at the funeral home. The card read, "With love, Grant and Claire Whitmore." Claire stared at it for several seconds. Even her grief had his name attached to it. "Mrs. Whitmore?" The funeral director asked carefully. "Where would you like these placed?" Claire looked at the roses. Outside. I'm sorry. Take them away. It was the first thing she had discarded that belonged to Grant. It would not be the last. After the burial, the mourners slowly disappeared beneath umbrellas and into waiting cars. Claire remained until only 3 people stood near the grave. Then a man approached her. Claire Bennett. She turned. He was in his 60s, wearing a rain-darkened wool coat and holding an old leather briefcase. Thomas Avery. I handled your mother's legal affairs. Claire recognized the name. Her mother had mentioned him for years. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. There's something Margaret asked me to give you. Thomas opened his briefcase. Claire's breath caught. The cream envelope. The same one she had found in her mother's last package. But Thomas held something else. A small brass key. Your mother was very specific. Claire accepted it. What does it open? Thomas smiled sadly. Home. 30 minutes later, Claire stood on the porch of the little white house where she had grown up. Margaret had never sold it. Claire had assumed she couldn't. She had been wrong. Inside, nothing smelled expensive. Old wood. Lavender. Coffee. Home. Claire sat at the kitchen table where Margaret had once braided her hair before school. Then she opened the envelope. 1 page. Her mother's handwriting. Claire, if you are reading this because you finally need somewhere to go, then I hope you understand what I could never force you to see. Claire's vision blurred. She kept reading. Being provided for is not the same as being loved. A beautiful house can still become a cage. A tear struck the paper. Then another. If the day ever comes when you confuse his permission with your freedom, come home. Claire covered her mouth. For 6 years, Margaret had watched. The canceled lunches. The friends Claire stopped seeing. The job Grant convinced her she no longer needed. The bank accounts slowly merged until independence became something Claire remembered instead of possessed. Her mother had known. Before Claire did. At the bottom were 7 final words. You never need permission to come home. Claire pressed the letter against her chest and finally broke. She cried for the funeral she had almost missed. For the mother she could no longer call. For the woman she had slowly disappeared into becoming. And for the daughter inside her who deserved never to learn that obedience was the price of love. Her phone vibrated. Grant, have you learned your lesson yet? Claire stared at the message. Then at Margaret's letter. Her tears stopped. She photographed Grant's text and forwarded it to Rebecca Sloan. Add this to the file. This time Rebecca answered immediately. Come to my office tomorrow. Bring everything. Claire looked around her mother's kitchen. At the brass key. At the letter. At the rain sliding down the window. Grant believed he was waiting for his wife to come home. He didn't understand. Claire already had. Grant changed tactics after the funeral. First came white peonies. Then a photograph of the nursery with a message beneath it. Everything is waiting for you. Claire read the next line twice. I'm willing to put this behind us. Not I'm sorry. Not I was wrong. Grant was offering forgiveness for something he had done to her. She saved the message and sent it to Rebecca. By the middle of the week, affection had become irritation. You've made your point. Come home. Grant still believed her grief was a tantrum and her silence was negotiation. On Wednesday afternoon, a black Mercedes stopped outside Margaret's house. Claire saw Grant through the kitchen window. Navy suit. Perfect posture. Expensive shoes on a weathered porch. She rested one hand over her belly. We knew this was coming, Maggie. The doorbell rang. Claire opened the door, but did not invite him inside. There you are, Grant said, as if she had been misplaced. Can we stop this now? You canceled my flight to my mother's funeral. I made a mistake. You suspended the household card. I was trying to get you home. You told our driver not to help me. I was worried about you. Claire watched him rename each decision until it sounded almost reasonable. Grant lowered his voice. I came all this way because I love you. You came to bring me back. You're my wife. Yes. And you're carrying my daughter. Yes. So come home. Claire turned to the hallway table and picked up a large envelope. Rebecca had filed the paperwork that morning. Formal service would be handled through the proper legal process. Claire had chosen to give Grant a copy herself. What's this? Open it. His eyes moved across the first page. A filed copy of the divorce papers. Grant laughed once, then stopped. You filed for divorce? Claire said nothing. You're grieving. You don't understand what divorce for me looks like. I'm learning. With what money? There it was. The question beneath every luxury he had ever used as proof that she should be grateful. With what money are you going to leave me, Claire? Mine. Grant froze. He knew every account he controlled. Every household card. every expense he could see. Yet Claire stood in a house he did not own, represented by a lawyer he had not selected, using savings he had never been allowed to manage. What have you done? Made a decision. Without discussing it with me? Claire let the irony answer for her. Grant tightened his grip on the papers. You'll regret embarrassing me. Claire almost pitted him. He still thought the filing was the biggest change. It was not. Her private passwords had changed. Location sharing was off. Counsel had asked both sides to preserve financial records. Claire had updated the permissions on services and accounts held solely in her name. Nothing had been hidden or destroyed. The difference was simpler. Grant no longer had automatic access to her life. Go home, she said. For the first time in 6 years, Grant was standing in front of his wife without the power to decide what happened next. Claire closed the door. Grant Whitmore knew something was wrong before he reached the penthouse. His phone had been vibrating for 20 minutes. Bank notifications. An email from his accountant. 2 calls from his attorney. Then he tried to open the patient portal he had long used to see Claire's appointment details. His proxy access no longer worked. Claire had updated her permissions. Grant stared at the screen. What the hell? The elevator doors opened. He stepped into the apartment and immediately called Claire. No answer. Again. Voicemail. By the 5th attempt, his controlled executive comm had disappeared. He called his accountant instead. Why am I getting notices about account changes? Mrs. Whitmore changed credentials on accounts titled solely in her name and redirected routine deposits to an account you don't administer. Reverse it. A pause. I can't change her credentials for you. And to be clear, title alone does not decide how property will ultimately be treated in a divorce. That is for the legal process. Grant stopped walking. For years, he had organized everything: insurance, travel, household spending, appointments, and called it efficiency. Claire had once called it helpful. Now the access he had taken for granted was disappearing one permission at a time. Her personal banking passwords had changed. His access to her private email was gone. Location sharing had been disabled. The household card linked to Claire's personal expenses had been separated. Rebecca Sloan had formally instructed that legal communications regarding the divorce go through counsel. Even Daniel received notice that Claire's transportation decisions were no longer to be redirected through Grant. He stared across the silent penthouse. Nothing had physically changed, yet somehow the entire place felt emptier. Grant called again. This time Claire answered. What are you doing? He demanded. Her voice was calm. Which part? Don't play games with me. I'm not. You removed my access to your medical information. Yes. You changed the accounts. My accounts. You hired a lawyer without discussing it with me. Claire was silent for a beat. Then, did you discuss canceling my flight with me? Grant's jaw tightened. We're back to that. No, Grant. We're finally past it. He walked toward the windows, staring down at the city his company had helped reshape. I apologized. You said you made a mistake. That is an apology. No. It's a description. Grant exhaled sharply. You are destroying a marriage over one canceled plane ticket. Claire almost laughed. One ticket. She looked around Margaret's kitchen. Rebecca's evidence folder lay open before her. 6 months of screenshots. Emails. Voicemails. Restrictions. Small incidents Grant had always dismissed because each one, alone, looked insignificant. It was never one ticket. What does that mean? It means the ticket was the first time you controlled something I couldn't pretend didn't matter. Grant went quiet. Claire continued. You chose my doctors. You monitored where I went. You decided which friends were bad for me. You shut off money when I disagreed with you. I paid for your life. No, her voice remained soft. You paid for things. That landed differently. Grant gripped the phone tighter. I gave you everything. You gave me everything except the right to say no. Silence. The baby shifted beneath Claire's palm. Grant's voice hardened. You're going to regret this when reality catches up with you. Claire closed the folder. Reality already did. What exactly do you think you've accomplished? Claire looked at Margaret's letter beside her. Then at the canceled boarding pass she had printed and placed inside the evidence file. Grant had canceled one flight because he believed access was power. He believed money was power. He believed marriage gave him permanent admission into every room of Claire's life. He had been wrong about all three. You canceled my flight because you thought you owned my choices, Claire said. Grant said nothing. I canceled your access to them. For the first time, he had no immediate answer. Claire could hear only his breathing. Then Grant whispered, You can't cancel me. Claire's pale blue eyes settled on the divorce petition. The divorce process will take time, she said. What ended today is your authority over my choices. She ended the call. Across the city, Grant stood motionless before the glass wall of his penthouse. His reflection stared back at him. Millionaire. Developer. A husband facing the end of his marriage. Then his phone vibrated. An email from his attorney appeared. Urgent. Preservation request received from Rebecca Sloan regarding financial records and communications. Grant opened it. His face drained of color. Because Claire had not merely walked away. She had kept receipts. And in 48 hours, Grant Whitmore would have to sit in a room full of lawyers and explain why a man who claimed to love his pregnant wife had believed her mother's funeral was something he had the right to cancel. 2 weeks later, now just over 32 weeks pregnant, Claire sat beside Rebecca Sloan in a quiet family law office overlooking the river. The room was smaller than Grant's boardroom and deliberately plain. No walnut wall, no view designed to impress, just 4 chairs, a round table, and 2 legal pads. Grant arrived with his attorney, Michael Reeves. He did not smile. Rebecca began carefully. Today is about temporary arrangements while the divorce case proceeds. No one is deciding the final division of property or parenting plan in this room. Grant's eyes moved to Claire's rounded belly. I want access to every appointment. Claire answered before Rebecca could. You'll receive the medical information I choose to share about the baby. My own records and appointments are mine. Michael touched Grant's arm when he started to interrupt. Rebecca continued. Claire had changed passwords only on accounts and services held in her own name. She had not hidden marital funds. Both sides had been asked to preserve financial records, travel records, and messages. Household expenses would be addressed through counsel. Grant's contact with Claire would stay limited to necessary matters about the pregnancy and the legal process. Grant looked at the printed timeline Rebecca had placed between the attorneys. It was not a dramatic stack. 5 pages. Dates. Messages. The canceled reservation. The suspended household card on which Grant was the primary account holder. The instruction to the driver. The text asking whether Claire had learned her lesson yet. You're making me sound like a monster, he said. Claire shook her head. I'm not asking you to become a monster in order for me to leave. That stopped him. For years, Grant had expected Claire either to surrender or to accuse him in a way he could dismiss as emotional. She did neither. I loved you, she said. I may always grieve what I thought we had. But love cannot require me to prove obedience before I'm allowed to bury my mother. Grant stared at the canceled itinerary. I was angry, he said finally. I know. I thought if you came home, we could fix the night. You tried to fix the night by taking away my choice. He looked up. For the first time since the airport, Claire saw something other than anger in his face. Shame did not repair what he had done. It did not erase 6 years of smaller decisions. But it was at least an emotion that belonged to reality. Grant's voice dropped. Are you really done? Claire rested a hand over Maggie. The divorce will take time. Your relationship with our daughter will be handled responsibly. But the marriage I was living in is over. Grant went still. Grant finally understood what Claire had ended. She was not trying to destroy his company, his fortune, or his future as a father. She was ending the marriage in which he had mistaken being her husband for being her authority. The meeting ended without applause or threats. Michael gathered the papers. Rebecca closed her folder. Grant remained seated for several seconds after everyone else stood. At the door, he called Claire's name. She turned. I'm sorry about your mother, he said. It was late, painfully late. But for once, there was no condition attached. Claire nodded. Thank you. Then she left with Rebecca. Grant did not have to become a different man before Claire was allowed to choose a different life. 3 months later, Claire Bennett stood beneath another departure screen. This time, nothing was read. Nothing was canceled. No warning flashed across her phone. No husband called to tell her where she was allowed to go. Just one word glowing beside her flight number. Confirmed. Claire smiled. In her arms, 5-week-old Margaret, Maggie, Bennett slept beneath a pale cream blanket, one tiny fist curled against her mother's chest. She had been born healthy near full term. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Blonde fuzz covered her head, and when the nurse first placed her against Claire's skin, Claire had cried so hard she could barely say the name. Margaret. Her mother had missed meeting her granddaughter by almost 4 months. But Claire liked to believe she had still saved her. The divorce moved slowly, as divorces often do. Grant kept his company and his wealth, while the legal process addressed money, parenting, and the end of the marriage. His attorneys negotiated. Claire's evidence remained preserved. Financial arrangements were established. Communication moved through documented channels. And Grant discovered that fatherhood did not give him ownership of Claire. For the first time, boundaries existed that his money could not simply erase. After several difficult months, Grant stopped bargaining and began following the communication boundaries their attorneys had established. His apology did not restore the marriage, but he learned that being Maggie's father meant showing up for her without using fatherhood to regain control of Claire. Claire became something else. Free. She spent the first weeks after Maggie's birth in Margaret's little white house. The nursery there was smaller than the one Grant had designed in the penthouse. No imported furniture. No custom chandelier. No designer wallpaper. Just a second-hand rocking chair beside the window and Margaret's old bookshelf against the wall. Claire loved every inch of it. When Maggie slept, Claire began drawing again. At first, 10 minutes at a time. Then an hour. Architectural illustrations. The work she had abandoned after Grant convinced her that her career was unnecessary. Her first new client paid less than Grant once spent on dinner. Claire stared at that payment for almost a minute, then laughed. It was hers. At the airport gate, Maggie stirred. Claire kissed her forehead. You ready? The baby yawned. Claire took that as yes. A boarding announcement echoed overhead. For a moment, memory returned. 4:47 a.m. Cold fluorescent lights. 7 months pregnant. Her mother dead. A canceled ticket glowing on a screen. Grant's voice. Maybe now you'll learn a lesson. Claire looked down at the boarding pass in her hand. Status. Confirmed. Funny. Grant had been right. She had learned something. Just not what he intended. She learned that dependence could wear the costume of luxury. That control could sound like concern. That a cage did not become freedom because the walls were expensive. And most importantly, she learned what Margaret had tried to tell her before it was too late. Being provided for was not the same as being loved. Now boarding. Claire stood. Her blonde hair fell loosely over the shoulders of a simple blue coat. Maggie rested safely against her chest. No driver carried her suitcase. No assistant arranged the itinerary. No millionaire approved the destination. Claire walked toward the gate herself. Her phone vibrated once. A message from Grant. She looked at his name. Months earlier, it would have changed her breathing. Now it was simply a name on a screen. Claire locked the phone without opening it. Then she handed her boarding pass to the gate agent. Beep. Green light. Have a wonderful flight, Ms. Bennett. Ms. Bennett. Claire smiled. I will. She walked down the jet bridge without looking back. Years earlier, Grant Whitmore had believed paying for Claire's life meant he owned the right to direct it. Then he canceled one flight to prove it. Instead, he gave his wife the one lesson his money could never take back. A man can pay for the ticket. He can cancel the reservation. He can even try to close every door. But once a woman remembers that her life belongs to her, he cannot decide where she goes next. If you had been Claire, would you have filed for divorce after the canceled funeral flight? Tell me in the comments.